Hello, and welcome to Michell Consulting's webinar series for our Michell University. Today we're going to be working with Infor FACTS and talk about the concept of the infrequent file maintenance for setting up the actual FACTS module. For purpose of today's demo, we're working with FACTS 7.7. So let's see here in the menu what the infrequent file maintenance does and how it is actually linked within FACTS. So we're going to go into sales order. And again, these are available in all the modules. We'll go through a few of them to show them to you. And then we'll show you the actual setup. So if we go into sales order and we go into file maintenance, we have something called infrequent file maintenance. The reason why it's set up this way is because typically this is a setup functionality. So normally you wouldn't really be going into the screen that much. It's infrequent. So once this is set up, normally a super user or somebody from administration would have to make changes. So you can see the different types of file maintenance. What's unique to all the modules is the static controls and the non-static controls. So for example, here's our static control. And if we open this, we see the functionalities or the link. So for example, here for sales order, under our static control, we have some options. So for example, if we're going to use job costing, we can set up to use job costing. If we're going to work with contract pricing, we would set it up. If we're going to use period sales registers and so on. So here it gives you the ability of actually creating all the information for the setup. And the reason why it's a static control, because this doesn't really change. Once we set this up, it's going to remain this way. So if we're going to store invoice history or past sales, we have it turned on. If we have multiple warehouse functionality, we would turn it on. So in the example of, let's say you started off and you had only one warehouse, and then later down the road you decide to open a second warehouse, you would have to then come into here and actually set this to a multiple warehouse. We have how we're handling inventory. Again, here we're allowing FACTS to allow back orders during the sales orders, so we can back order items. We can auto reprint back orders if we wish. We're looking at some of the defaults. For example, the way we're determining the price, what we're using for our sales order cost and our serial lot cost, our default terms, cash customer, and so on. So again, this gives you the ability of setting up your parameters. And this is normally done in the beginning when we actually originally set up a FACTS account. We will work with you to actually get this information in. But again, you can make changes to it, how you handle tax, if you're working with serial lots, and so on. So you can see a lot of information in here. Again, how you handle entries and so on. Those are static. Again, the static controls are kind of set and they don't really change. You also have what's known as the non-static controls. And this is something that will change from time to time. Again, at an initial setup, for example, we can see here our current sales period for the purpose of the demo is June of 2010. So if I was actually setting up a FACTS system and I was scheduled to go live on a given date, and I'm going to go live, say, on January 1st, what I would do is I would set that as my current period, and then I would put all the last update dates. Again, that just allows me to get everything set up for once I actually start. Once the system begins, the non-static control will change. So you can see as we close the months, we will have our updates, the last end of period update, and so on, the recurring in here. Here's something that we have here for the terminals. This is let you know, again, for locking files. This is useful sometimes because a lot of times what happens is people will be running the daily sales register. They didn't get to the update part, but for some reason they lost communication, and they need to rerun it, and you'll get the message saying that the terminal is running, the daily sales register is running on a specific terminal. Here you can release that. And again, here is the last document numbers. So again, this is part of the setup because what we'll do is from the legacy system, we would want a continuation from the legacy system. We can enter, let's say, your last quote, your last sales orders, and so on. And this is where FACTS will get the information for doing quotes and orders. So again, you see those two. You have the static controls, which are basically don't change. They're set up, so you're either always going to post a history or not. And you have the non-static controls. Non-static controls are, again, things that will change throughout the system as I use, as we do, like end of period, we'll update this and so on. Another important thing here is the interlink to general ledger. What we can do is we can actually have the separate modules in FACTS basically update general ledger. And by standard, this is always really done. You have some options. We normally go with the print and post. But if you wanted not to interface, you can actually turn off the module. So if I do a not used, what's going to happen is I will still print the general ledger distributions, but I won't actually be posting to general ledger. You can also do it in print, like I said, or you can print and post. The option number 2, you're going to actually print as well as update general ledger. And again, there's some information for defaults here. You can see is how we're going to determine our general ledger, and this is where the GL comes from. So a lot of times when people run the daily sales register and they do the update and they get the postings, they ask, why are these accounts being affected? And this is where they're coming from. You can do it from a certain ways. You can use this table, like for example, accounts receivable. You have some options. You can use the default GL, which means that every time I post, all my transactions for invoices will be going to this accounts receivable account. Some clients like to have the customer GL account. Notice that when I do that, this turns out gray. What this means is I want to have different general ledger accounts for different, say, customer types. I may have a general ledger account for domestic customers, a general ledger account for foreign customers, and so on. So by changing the defaults, instead of using this as my default account, I'm going to be reading the GL account that's in the business partner. And again, you'll see holds true for a lot of these. Okay, sales merchandise, I can use the default. I can actually do from item. Some people like to post their sales by item types. Okay, so we can have different GL accounts for types of items we sell, and we can also do it by the customer. Again, you have that, and again, you just have here is the standard. You have some more GL accounts. Again, the inventory. A lot of people like to do this based on the item, cost of goods sold, and again, you should, if you're putting one, you should do the other one. So if you're going to post your inventory account by item, you should set your cost of goods and your sales and also by item just to make it consistent. Makes it easier to reconcile at the end of the month. So again, you see that, all the setups in here. Now, as we discussed, this is in every module. So for example, this is the infrequent file maintenance that's unique to sales order. If we go to purchasing, and again, we go to file maintenance, and we go to infrequent file maintenance. Again, we can see here that we have the same type of thing. We have some other stuff like the buyers and the cost class. But here we have our static controls. And again, this is stuff that you would normally set up one time. We are going to store past POs in our history. We are going to allow back orders on our purchase orders. We're going to do invoice receipts and so on. You can set all this up. Again, your print controls. How do you want to print? What do you want to print? You can see a message, maybe printing on the forms. And again, static meaning that once it's kind of set, you're not really going to make a change to it. We also have the non-static controls. And again, this is like you saw on the other one. We have our current PO period. So right now we're in June of 2010. The last time we were updated was May 31st, 2010. And again, we have our PO numbers. As you see here with the receipt register running, we can see if it's running, if it's locked. So again, this is something that we would normally set up when a client is going live, and we predict to go live. In this case, let's say we're going to go on August of 2010. So we would set this to the August, because we need a couple months to get ready. And then we would put our last numbers in here. Again, we have the PO to GL posting, again, unique to all the modules. So we have the same thing. How are we going to handle our GL distribution? We're not going to use it at all. We're just going to print, or we're going to print and actually post to update the general ledger. Again, our GL posting journal, we're just using the 5000 series for reporting purposes. And we have, again, here the information. So inventory, we can either use the default, which is going to use the GL account that we determine here, or we can pull it from the actual inventory account. If we're set up for branches and departments, we can set it up to post that way. You can see here we have a branch, the 01 in the middle, and a department, so we can do it that way. So again, we have that in all the modules. If we go into, say, AP, and we look here, we have the infrequent file maintenance of AP. And again, the same principles are involved. We have our static controls, which is, again, our setup. Here what we're doing is we're telling it this is going to be my default bank, bank 01. Again, that option we're going to post and print. And again, how we're posting by branch, what we're using, and some, again, other information here. This is the setup. This is where the information is coming from when we work with FACTS, when we run our sales registers and we post. This is where the general information is coming from. So we have them in all the modules. You can also, and it's nice if you're going to work with this, if you're setting up a new company, you can actually, instead of going from module to module, it's convenient to go into the system management. And we have here the system initialization. So here we're talking about the actual setup. So if we look here at the system setup, again, we can determine our terminal types. Here we would set, for example, our user codes. We would have our bank file maintenance. And again, this is where we would create stuff. So this is important because if we are opening up a new bank, you know, that's where we would have to go in here and we'd have to select our new bank. You know, we have this right here. And again, you would put the GL account for the bank and all the other information about the bank is set up in here. And again, the balance is coming over from the system. So it's nice because what it allows me to do is just go through the module. So I would go through here, my initial system, and then I have my general ledger set up. And again, we have our GL parameters. So we're looking at the static and non-static controls. Again, we see those in each module. So again, it allows us a very simple way of going through. And then we have our files here. I was working with departments. You can see we have department. Again, historical. You can load some historical data live in the middle of a fiscal year. We can do one of two clients like to do is go in. We can set up our files here. So very convenient way of doing it. The best thing to remember about the infrequent file maintenance is the reason why we have it set up that way is because typically we're not going to be using it that often. It's infrequent. It's normally reserved for setup. A lot of times what we do is we use security codes. So we allow people not to go into the setup. And in the setup there is, again, as you can see with all the models, there's always going to be a static control, a non-static control, and then the module posting to general ledger. So again, you can see here in inventory, we have our static control file maintenance. And again here, get that a little bit smaller on the screen. Again, we're determining how FACTS is going to behave. And this is what we do in our initial meeting, our initial prep with the client. You can go through here and determine what's going on. So in this case, you can see here that we are going to use serial and lot numbers. We are using the ledger card. We're allowing quick entry for inventory. We're going to use job costing. Again, these are some nice features. We're allowing it to overcommit. We normally don't like to allow negative inventory on hand, but typically in the beginning, maybe during training or in the beginning, we may want to do that because we don't have our balances loaded, so we can set it up that way. And again, how we handle our costing and pricing, our costing method, if we're going to do LIFO, FIFO, average, and so on. You can see our price levels in here. So again, the static controls is the initial setup of how fax behaves. It's considered static because once it's set, it's set. So I'm always going to have 6 price levels. It's not going to change throughout the month or over time. And then I have my non-static controls. The non-static controls tend to be the numbering series and things that will change as time goes on. Again, what we have here is our current inventory control period. So again, our current period is June of 2010 for the demo. You can see the last time we've updated it. And again, all our register numbers. This is important, especially on the sales and AR side, because when we're going from one system to another, we want to have consistency, so we want to take the last invoice numbers from one system and make it the beginning invoice numbers in fax. And again, we have the same thing with every module is going to have its GL posting. We have that option, post and print. And again, here we're posting by branch and so on. That's the infrequent file maintenance in fax. Again, it's really more of a setup. It's in each module. You can access the infrequent file maintenance from every module. So, for example, if we go into, let's go all the way out. Let's go into, say, accounts payable. Under file maintenance, we have infrequent file maintenance. And again, we can see those unique. We always have the static and non-static controls, and always the postings of how we're handling the posting. And that's in every module. If we want to get it all grouped together, typically when we're first setting up a new company, what we want to do is we want to go to System Management, and under the System Initialization, we have here all the frequent file maintenance from all the modules. So again, very easy to work with. To recap, that's what we do when we deal with the infrequent file maintenance. You know, it's used for setup purposes. As a general rule, you should have security. You should set a security level in there because it's something that you don't want to change. You've noticed that in actually some of the modules, you will get a message. I believe it's in the non-static here. Sometimes you want to make changes. It may cause issues in here for changing the information. So you want to be careful how you change this. So again, typically what we do is we set a security level for that. So okay, well that concludes our webinar today. We talked, to recap, we went over the infrequent file maintenance in Infor FACTS. Today we use FACTS 7.7 for our demo. We discussed how the infrequent file maintenance is unique to every module. It's in the file maintenance section of the of each module, as well as laid out in the system initialization under the system management. And again, it's the infrequent file maintenance is typically the setup. It's things that we're going to kind of set one time and leave alone. It determines how fax behaves, if we're interfaced with general ledger, what GL accounts we're posting to, if we're using multiple warehouses, if we're posting by branch or department, if we're using serial batches. Again, a lot of information like that to set up. Typically what we do here at Michell with a new client, we'll actually sit down and we'll review this with the client. It's good to get a feeling of how they want the system to handle. This is very important because a lot of times if the system is not set up correctly, it's not going to give you the results you want, and you're not going to get the best practices from using the software. That's why we here at Michell, we spend time in the implementation to really understand our client's needs and to really go through and set this up correctly so you'll get the best of SAP. And FACTS, again, will allow you to set this up and make your software work extremely well and efficient for your type of business. Okay, well that concludes our webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It's available on our website. You can visit us at www.mitchellgroup.com to view this plus all our other training videos for Infor FACTS. Once again, we're going to conclude the webinar, and we thank you very much for your time.